Frostpunk is a city-building survival strategy game by 11-bit studios, set in a bleak apocalyptic version of the late Victorian age. Due to a series of natural disasters, the Earth is rapidly cooling, and is experiencing a great winter that has brought all nations to their knees. You play the role of a captain of an expedition sent from Britain to the far north to establish a new settlement based around a great generator. You will either survive or succumb to the coming storms depending upon your actions. At the time of this review, I have sunk about 16 hours into Frostpunk. I've completed the 3 currently available scenarios on the default difficulty. I've also replayed and beaten the first scenario on hard difficulty. Frostpunk's core gameplay revolves around 2 main systems, the collection and use of resources and balancing your citizens' hope and discontent with your leadership. These resources are wood, steel, food, coal, and the much sought after steam cores. These resources are used in various ways to expand your city and keep your citizens alive, or as close to it as possible. Steel and wood are primarily a construction resource used to build structures and to fund research projects. These allow access to more advanced structures and features like scouts, more efficient buildings, and automatons. Food is consumed by your citizens. It can be gathered by hunters, found by scouts, and farmed in hothouses. Food shortage is a common and dangerous threat to both your authority and the health of your citizens. If you don't match the population size with adequate food provision, bad things are going to happen, obviously. The last main resource is coal, precious coal, which the heart of your city, the generator, consumes in abundance. Much like food, if a steady supply of coal isn't available to meet the demands of your heating systems, then bad things are going to happen. Namely, people will start freezing to death and getting rather upset. The difference between coal and food shortages, however, is that coal shortages are far more lethal, as people can starve for a few days, but they freeze to death in hours. Finally, there are steam cores, a very limited resource that is primarily found in the frozen wastes by your scouts. These power your most advanced technology, like automatons, higher tier production buildings, and advanced healthcare. Hope and discontent are effectively Frostpunk's happiness mechanic. Passing various laws and building certain structures will raise or lower hope and discontent. There are also major and minor events that can affect hope and discontent depending on how you deal with them. An example is during the early game people will ask for housing. You can choose to ignore them, promise them some housing, or attempt to house everyone. The payoff or penalty being larger if you try to please everyone. You will have to keep discontent as low as possible, as if it gets too high your settlement will begin to mutiny and will eventually abandon the project. Hope represents how your people feel about their chances to survive under your leadership. It will affect the tone of your citizens and will affect the outcome of minor and some major events. So simply put, if you want your colony to survive, you must keep hope high and discontent low. I found this mechanic to suit the bleak setting nicely and provide quite a gripping challenge to work around, as the game already has a strong progression system with new technology and laws that keep things fresh right till the end. The game also has some major events that can really change your priorities and will keep you on your toes, keeping the game engaging. However, there are some tactics that are stronger than others. I found that automatons are very powerful, as unlike your citizens, they don't need to sleep, eat, or suffer any ill effects from the cold. Once you have enough of them, it can be fairly trivial to keep your city alive, as it effectively becomes automatically self-sustaining. This can cause a lot of endgames to be identical, with the early to mid-game being a struggle, and the late game being a breeze, even on the hardest difficulties. If you choose not to use them, then the late game can be very difficult. The main enemy in Frostpunk is the cold itself. The core mechanics serve as ways by which you stave it off. If your citizens get too cold, they will start to become ill, and will eventually die. You have to spend most of your time ensuring your citizens have adequate heating to keep your city running smoothly. This can be very tough when resources are tight, and provide a constant and oppressive looming threat. As the days go by, it will get much colder, meaning that your technology will have to keep pace. This means there is an ideal order in which to get techs to ensure you have an easier time of things, which once discovered can make most playthroughs become identical in tech progression. However, despite this, the tech tree is expansive and gives the player lots of interesting options. It can be quite the challenge to get all the research done before the end of a game. Frostpunk's other progression system is the Book of Laws. I found this to be a very interesting mechanic. This is because there's a lot to choose from, and each branch of law offers conflicting solutions to the same problem. Depending on what you choose, the way your city functions will change drastically. Will you dispose of corpses in a crypt, or use them as fertiliser? Will you put children in safe places from the cold, or will you put them to work? Will you choose to fight the cold with order and discipline, or through faith and prayer? These choices reflected the game's moral choice system in disguise. However, rather than good versus evil, it's more practicality versus morality. My only issue with this system is that some choices are just better than others, meaning that you will rarely pick the alternative. For example, I've never had to choose to use corpses in farming or make children work. I feel that if you could change laws after you pass them, then I might be more inclined to use the more dubious laws when times are really dire. As it stands, it's an interesting, if very limited system with a fantastic character. Also limited are the scenario time limits. The game's main scenario, New Home, lasts for about 40 days. The other two scenarios are also time limited. I found it somewhat disappointing that the game did not ship with the endless mode, however the devs have said one is coming. Despite this, you still get a fair amount of time to work with the other scenarios. However, if you delay too much or waste too much time, you can find yourself getting hit with repeated setbacks which are time sensitive that will be the end of your colony. This can be frustrating for people who want to explore everything in the wastes, or get everything in the tech tree, but it does reinforce the desperate tone the game is going for, so I don't believe it's anywhere near a deal breaker. The story of the game is told on a scenario-to-scenario basis. These scenarios are independent from each other in terms of individual narrative, but all share the same overarching plot. This plot is essentially find generator, build city, and don't become Victorian ice lollies. The sub-objective of each city is different, however. From the three available, I'd say they all offer an interesting motivation, with the third scenario, the refugees, being the most interesting, and the first scenario being the blandest. The plot of these places is told through text-based events that will pop up in response to goings-on and discoveries. They will often ask you to make choices that have knock-on effects down the line, which I found to be quite engaging, as it helps you build a connection with your citizens' plight and flesh out the world. Some of the choices you'll be asked to make can seem a bit superficial, especially if you've stockpiled with the supplies it's asking for. This can clash with the tone of the story sometimes. However, this is rare, so I wouldn't call it a massive flaw in the game's writing or plot. Overall, I would say Frostpunk stories are interesting enough to keep you invested until the end of a scenario, but they aren't much more beyond that. The premise of Frostpunk, however, I find to be very interesting and original. A post-apocalyptic steampunk city-building game is already a rare thing, with perhaps They Are Billions being the only other similar title. Being set in a frozen apocalypse, however, makes this game, in my opinion, truly original. I'm running Frostpunk on a GTX 1060, with an Intel i5 66K and with 16 gigs of RAM. The game runs at a solid 60 FPS at high ultra settings at 1080p. I've had a few bits of stuttering here and there during big transitions, but nothing so jarring that it detracts from the experience. I've found the look of the game to be spectacular. Everything is designed to support the tone of the game and does so extremely well. The snowy waste around your city contrasts sharply with the rickety and makeshift buildings, with these buildings wonderfully exposing a steampunk vibe. Also, the little touches, like how citizens have to dig and leave trails through the snow, that then slowly refill with the snowfall, and how automatons carefully step over buildings to avoid them, really add to the feel of the game being a living world on the brink. Speaking of which, the design of automatons is fantastic. They appear otherworldly and are fantastic interpretations of what a steampunk robot could look like. The best part of the visuals for me though is once you pick a path of either order or faith, the city will start to transform to represent its ideology. This can lead to some striking visuals that I would argue are good enough to be desktop backgrounds. The UI is also very good, keeping in tone with the cold atmosphere. It's easy enough to read and makes placement of buildings and roads simple. My only complaint with the visuals is that you can't zoom in and very close to your citizens, which is only a small complaint and doesn't really detract from the quality. Frostpunk's sound design is also top-notch, with an arrangement of orchestral scores that are both melancholy and inspiring. The music fits the tone of the game perfectly, and none of it feels out of place. After listening to it for a while, it can all blend together sometimes during downtime, and how reserved it is. During certain events though, it is very fitting and complements the situation perfectly, and I find myself listening to it out of game occasionally. The other sounds like voice work, environmental sounds and weather are all at least decent. The only voice work in the game is the town crier and the intro, however they are well done. The town crier especially becoming a constant companion through your playthrough. The weather and environmental noises are decent most of the time, however just like the music, the weather effects become more prominent at certain times and really hammer home just how unpleasant the situation is for your people. The environmental noises are suitably steampunk. Wheels turn, steam hisses, people laugh, cry and yell as life goes on around your city. Overall, a great example of sound design that wonderfully complements the game's aesthetic while not being overbearing or dull. Frostpunk, in my opinion, is a brilliantly fresh take on the city building and management genre, adding a steampunk spin and a frozen apocalypse into the mix. All of its various features, including its challenging gameplay, and wonderful graphic and sound design come together to make what is ultimately an interesting, unique and niche title that will keep you busy for at least 12 and up to 20 hours if you do all the hard versions of the scenarios. The time it takes to complete the game is a bit on the short side for a city building game. However, with more content on the way, this will hopefully give the game more longevity. With an asking price of £25 or $29, I would argue that is a fair deal. You may not agree, but I feel I got my money's worth. With all these aspects considered, I would give Frostpunk a 4 out of 5. A wonderfully niche city building game that I think anyone can enjoy, even those who are not typically fans of city builders. Seeing as this is my first review, I would appreciate some feedback to help me improve, so please leave any thoughts you have in the comments, or let me know if there are any games you would like me to review. Have a good day guys, and thanks for watching.